In the glittering heart of Zurich, where the Sapphire Clocktower chimes secrets over Lake Zurich, legendary detective Hercule Poirot arrives at the urgent call of his old friend, master watchmaker Henri Duval. Amid a gathering of family and rivals for the unveiling of a revolutionary clockwork automaton, a midnight scream shatters the night. Duval lies stabbed in his locked workshop, a sapphire-encrusted dagger in his chest, the automaton frozen in accusation. As Poirot unravels a web of alibis, hidden affairs, gambling debts, and black market gem smuggling, suspicions fall on Duval's brooding son, Victor, his ambitious fiancée, Lydia, rival horologist, Dr. Becker, and secretive secretary, Sophie. But in a stunning eclipse-lit revelation, the truth ticks into place. Duval's elegant wife, Elise, driven by fear of ruin, scaled the tower's sheer wall in fog-shrouded darkness to commit the impossible crime. Justice prevails, legacies mend, and Poirot's gray cells triumph once more in this Agatha Christie-inspired tale of deception, passion, and timeless intrigue. Will you uncover the clues before the final chime? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Zurich. The express train from Paris glided smoothly into Zurich's Hauptbahnhof, its whistle piercing the clear mountain air like a sharp note in an otherwise harmonious symphony. Hercule Poirot, seated in the first-class compartment, folded his newspaper with precise movements and rose to his feet. He was a small man, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit of fine wool, his egg-shaped head held high, and his magnificent mustache waxed to perfection. The journey had been tolerable, though he deplored the modern haste that sacrificed comfort for speed. Yet the summons that brought him here was not to be ignored. As he descended onto the platform, the bustling crowd parted instinctively before him, as if sensing the aura of quiet authority that surrounded the great Belgian detective. Waiting at the barrier was Monsieur Henri Duval, his old friend and correspondent, a figure of robust vitality despite his advancing years. Duval's face, lined with the intricate patterns of a lifetime spent over watch mechanisms, broke into a relieved smile upon sighting Poirot. "Mon cher Poirot, you have arrived at the perfect hour. I feared the trains might delay you." Duval clasped his hand warmly, his grip firm from years of handling delicate tools. Poirot inclined his head. "The trains of Switzerland, they are like your clocks, Henri, precise to the second. But your letter, it intrigued me. A matter of grave importance, you wrote, and something about the Sapphire Clocktower, unwinding like a faulty spring. What troubles you, my friend?" Duval glanced around, his eyes darting as if the very station walls might overhear. "Not here, Hercule. Come, my carriage awaits. We shall speak in private." The drive through Zurich's winding streets was a revelation of orderly beauty. The Limmat River sparkling under the afternoon sun. The medieval guild houses standing sentinel along the banks. And in the distance, the snow-capped Alps framing the city like a majestic backdrop. Poirot admired it all with a nod of approval, though his mind was already turning over the puzzle Duval had hinted at. They arrived at Duval's residence, a grand villa nestled in the old town, its facade adorned with ornate balconies. Adjoining it was the workshop, a towering structure culminating in the famed Sapphire Clocktower. The tower's face, a masterpiece of horological art, featured numerals encrusted with deep blue sapphires that gleamed like captured fragments of the sky. At each hour, it chimed with a melody that echoed across the lake, a testament to Duval's genius. Inside the villa, the air was rich with the scent of polished wood and faint oil from the workshop. Duval led Poirot to a sunlit salon, where a group had assembled in anticipation of the evening's event, the unveiling of Duval's latest creation, a clockwork automaton reputed to forecast celestial events with unparalleled accuracy. "We gather tonight to witness its debut," Duval explained, his voice laced with pride. "But first, allow me to introduce you to those who share my world." Seated by the window was Madame Élise Duval, Henri's wife, a woman of refined French elegance, her dark hair swept into a chignon and her dress a subtle shade of lavender silk. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, met Poirot's with a polite smile that did not quite reach them. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. Henri speaks of you often." Beside her stood Victor Duval, the son, a tall young man with his father's build, but a shadowed expression that suggested inner turmoil. His hands, restless, toyed with a pocket watch chain. "Father's summons must be serious to bring you from retirement," he remarked, his tone edged with curiosity. Victor's fiancée, Miss Lydia Hargrove, an Englishwoman of striking beauty with auburn curls and a necklace of pearls, extended her hand gracefully. "Enchanted, monsieur. I've read of your exploits in the papers. How thrilling to meet a real detective." Her gaze lingered momentarily on the sapphire-studded clock visible through the window, a flicker of admiration, or perhaps avarice, in her eyes. Dr. Karl Becker, a horologist from Berlin, lounged in an armchair, his Teutonic features set in a mask of professional skepticism. His beard was trimmed to a point, and his spectacles glinted as he nodded curtly. "Poirot, I've heard you unravel knots in human affairs as we do in mechanisms. Duval insists on your presence. I wonder why." Finally, there was Madame Sophie Laurent, Duval's secretary, a quiet woman in her 30s with mousy hair pinned neatly and a notebook ever at hand. She offered a murmur of greeting, her fingers absently tracing the edge of a ledger as if accustomed to recording every detail. As the afternoon waned, the group adjourned to the dining room for an early supper, the table laid with Swiss delicacies, fondue steaming in a caquelon, rusty, crisp, and golden, and wines from the local vineyards. Conversation flowed, but Poirot, ever the observer, noted the undercurrents. Duval expounded on his automaton, his eyes alight. "It is more than a machine, mes amis. It dances with the stars, predicting eclipses as if whispering secrets from the heavens." Becker snorted, setting down his glass with a clink. "A parlor trick, Duval. True horology demands rigor, not this fanciful automation. You've invited me here to gloat, no doubt." Victor shifted uncomfortably, his fork pausing mid-air. "Father's work is revolutionary, Doctor. Perhaps your Berlin methods are outdated." Lydia interjected smoothly, her voice light. "Gentlemen, let us not quarrel. The sapphires alone make the tower a wonder. Such gems, they must be priceless." Elise, sipping her wine, cast a glance at her husband. "Henri, you work too hard. This obsession with perfection, it exhausts you." Sophie remained silent, her eyes downcast, though Poirot caught her stealing a look at Victor, a moment of unspoken connection that vanished as quickly as it appeared. As the meal concluded and dusk settled over the lake, the guests retired to prepare for the unveiling. Poirot lingered with Duval in the salon, the ticking of myriad clocks a constant chorus. "Now, Henri, tell me the truth. Why am I here?" Duval sighed, sinking into a chair. "There have been threats, Poirot. anonymous notes warning me to abandon the automaton, and whispers of theft focused on the sapphires. I fear sabotage, or worse. The tower holds not just time, but fortunes. Poirot's green eyes narrowed. And you suspect one among us? Before Duval could reply, the clock tower began its evening chime, the notes pure and resonant. But as the final stroke of midnight echoed, wait, no, it was only nearing 11, yet the thought lingered like a premonition. The villa fell quiet, save for the distant lapping of waves. Then, shattering the peace, a piercing scream rent the air from the direction of the workshop. The group converged at the tower's base, hearts pounding. There, sprawled amid scattered tools and glinting gears, lay Henri Duval, his life ebbing away. A dagger, its hilt encrusted with sapphires that matched the tower's face, protruded from his chest. Beside him, the automaton whirred to life unbidden, its brass limbs jerking in a macabre parody of motion, as if pointing an accusatory finger at the shadows. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The clamor following the scream had scarcely subsided when the heavy tread of officialdom echoed through the villa's corridors. Inspector Lucas Weber of the Zurich Kantonspolizei burst into the workshop at the base of the Sapphire Clocktower, his uniform crisp as starched linen, his face a mask of unyielding Swiss precision. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a jaw that seemed carved from the granite of the Alps themselves, and eyes that missed nothing in their cold, analytical sweep. Accompanying him were two subordinates, notebooks at the ready, and a police surgeon whose satchel clinked with the tools of his grim trade. Poirot, who had been the first to kneel beside the fallen Duval, rose gracefully, dusting his knees with a silk handkerchief. "Inspector," he said in his soft, accented voice, "you arrive with the promptness of a cuckoo clock. Hercule Poirot, at your service." Weber's eyebrows rose fractionally. "Poirot, the Belgian detective? Duval mentioned you might be here. A fortunate coincidence. Or is it?" His tone held a note of suspicion, as if even the renowned sleuth could not escape the net of potential culpability. "Coincidence, non," Poirot replied mildly. "I am here at Monsieur Duval's invitation, and now, alas, I am here for justice." He gestured to the body, where Duval lay sprawled on the polished oak floor, his white shirt stained crimson around the protruding dagger. The workshop itself was a testament to ordered chaos, workbenches lined with tiny screwdrivers, magnifying glasses, and trays of glittering components, shelves groaning under the weight of half-assembled timepieces, and in the center the automaton, a life-sized figure of brass and enamel, its jointed limbs now frozen in mid-gesture, as if halted in the act of revelation. Above it all loomed the internal mechanism of the clock tower, accessible by a narrow iron ladder, its gears silent but for a faint, ominous ticking. The room was reached solely by a spiral staircase from the villa's main hall, a staircase now cordoned by Weber's men. The door at its top had been found locked from the inside, the heavy iron key still clutched in Duval's lifeless hand. There were no windows, only slits high in the walls for ventilation, too narrow for a cat to pass, let alone a murderer. The servant, a stoic fellow named Fritz, who had been stationed at the foot of the stairs on Duval's orders to prevent interruptions during his final adjustments to the automaton, swore on his mother's grave that no one had ascended or descended since Duval entered alone at 10 o'clock. Weber knelt by the body, his gloved hands probing carefully. Stabbed once, straight to the heart. Clean wound, no hesitation. The weapon? He examined the dagger without touching it. An antique piece, its blade etched with intricate patterns, the hilt studded with sapphires that caught the lamplight in cold blue fire. From his own collection, no doubt, Duval was known for his curiosities. Précisément, Poirot agreed, his cat-like eyes gleaming. It is one of a set displayed in the villa's study, but observe, Inspector, the hilt bears a faint smear, as if gripped by a hand not quite steady. And there, a trace of perfume, subtle, like jasmine in the night air. The police surgeon, a bespectacled man named Dr. Muller, confirmed the time of death after a brief examination. Between 11 and midnight, I'd wager. Rigor has not yet set in fully, and the blood is still fresh. No signs of struggle. The victim was taken by surprise. Poirot circled the automaton, his small hands clasped behind his back. The machine, Duval's pride, was a marvel, dressed in the garb of an 18th century astronomer, with a telescope in one hand and a globe in the other. Now it bore a macabre addition, a smudge of blood on its brass chest plate, as if Duval had clutched at it in his final moments. "This contraption," Poirot murmured. "It was active when we arrived, its arms moving erratically. Now it is still. What triggered it, I wonder?" Weber issued orders to his men. Seal the room, photograph everything, dust for fingerprints. The household, gathered in a huddle at the staircase's base, were herded into the drawing room for questioning. Elise Duval, pale as porcelain, leaned on her son's arm, her lavender gown disheveled. Victor's face was ashen, his eyes darting wildly. Lydia Hargrove clutched a handkerchief, her auburn curls tumbling loose. Dr. Becker stood apart, arms folded, his expression one of detached curiosity rather than grief. Sophie Laurent, the secretary, hovered at the edges, her notebook forgotten in her lap. The inspector began with Elise. "Madame Duval, where were you at the time of the scream?" She dabbed at her eyes. "In my bedroom, Inspector. I had a dreadful headache. The excitement of the evening, you see. Henri insisted I rest. I heard nothing until the cry." Victor spoke next, his voice strained. "I was out walking by the lake. The air clears my head after arguments. Father and I had words earlier about the automaton. He thought my contributions insignificant." "Alone?" Weber pressed. "Yes, quite alone." Lydia's turn came. The library, reading a novel, something light to pass the time. Sophie passed the door at one point. She might have seen me. Sophie nodded hesitantly. "Yes, I glimpsed her through the glass panel as I went to fetch some papers from the study. I was typing correspondence in my office until the scream startled me." Dr. Becker admitted freely to a confrontation. "Duval and I argued in the salon after dinner. Old rivalries. He accused me of envy. I called his work derivative. But I retired to my room by 10:30, nursing a cigar and my wounded pride. The tower is visible from my window, but I saw no one enter or leave." As the interrogations proceeded, Poirot moved about the workshop like a shadow, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. He noted the clock tower's hands, visible through an internal dial, frozen at 11:45, though the chime had rung midnight just before the discovery. "The time, it deceives," he whispered to himself. "A chime without movement. How is this possible?" On the floor, amid the scattered tools, lay a small gear, dislodged perhaps from the automaton or the tower mechanism itself. It bore no dust, suggesting recent disturbance. He sniffed the air. Oil, metal, and something else. A hint of tobacco. faint but distinct. Becker's cigar or another's? The dagger's perfume lingered in his thoughts. It matched the scent Elise wore, but she had mentioned lending her bottle to Lydia. A red herring or a clue? Weber, concluding the initial statements, turned to Poirot. "Your thoughts, monsieur? This appears a locked room puzzle. Door bolted from within. No other access." Poirot twirled his mustache, a habit that betrayed the furious activity of his little gray cells. "Ah, but puzzles are meant to be solved, Inspector. Consider the motives. Duval's will, I understand from whispers, favors Victor entirely. Yet there are debts. The workshop expansions were costly, rivalries too. Becker's presence here was no mere courtesy. And the sapphires? Such gems invite greed. Miss Hargrove's admiration was not idle." The inspector grunted. "We'll check alibis thoroughly. Fritz the servant confirms no one used the stairs." "Yet someone did the impossible," Poirot countered softly. "Or made it seem so." As the police wrapped the body and sealed the door with tape, Poirot requested a moment alone in his guest chamber. The room overlooked the lake, its waters now ink-black under the moon. He paced the Persian rug, his patent leather shoes silent. The scream replayed in his mind. High, feminine, or distorted by echo? The automaton's bloodied plate? Had Duval reached for it, or had it been placed there? Motive, method, opportunity, the trinity of crime. Elise's headache, convenient. Victor's walk, unverifiable yet. Lydia's reading, witnessed obliquely. Sophie's typing, the clack of keys might cover other sounds. Becker's argument, a smokescreen. And the sapphires? Duval had hinted at threats concerning them. Were they merely decorative, or hid they a darker provenance? Poirot paused by the window, gazing at the clock tower's silhouette. Its sapphires winked like accusatory eyes. "The truth," he murmured. "It ticks away, hidden in the gears of deception." Downstairs, the household dispersed to uneasy rest, whispers trailing like smoke. Weber posted guards, promising further inquiries at dawn. But for Poirot, sleep would wait. The puzzle had ensnared him, and his gray cells demanded resolution. The night deepened, the lake's waves a rhythmic counterpoint to the villa's stifled sobs. In the sealed workshop, the automaton stood sentinel over emptiness, its secrets locked as tightly as the room itself. Yet, somewhere, a killer breathed freely, believing the perfect crime committed. Poirot smiled faintly in the darkness. "No, my friend. Perfection is the domain of Hercule Poirot." Chapter 3. Interrogations and Alibis. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of the villa's drawing room, casting intricate patterns on the polished parquet floor that resembled the inner workings of a clock dial. Hercule Poirot, having risen early despite the night's disturbances, stood by the mantelpiece, his hands folded neatly behind his back. The room was a symphony of antique horology. Ormolu clocks, on every surface, their pendulums swinging in hypnotic unison, marking the inexorable passage of time. Yet, for Poirot, time was not merely measured. It was dissected, analyzed, and bent to reveal the truths hidden in its folds. Inspector Weber had convened the household here for formal interrogations, his men stationed discreetly at the doors to prevent any untimely departures. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, the aroma of strong coffee mingling with the faint metallic tang from the workshop below. Elise Duval sat primly on a velvet settee, her face composed but her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief into knots. Victor paced by the window, his shadow stretching long across the rug. Lydia Hargrove, perched on the edge of an armchair, her eyes red-rimmed from what might have been tears or sleeplessness. Dr. Becker lounged in a high-backed chair, his pipe clenched between his teeth, emitting puffs of aromatic smoke that curled lazily toward the ceiling. Sophie Laurent occupied a modest stool in the corner, her posture straight as a ruler, though her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a sheaf of papers. Weber cleared his throat, his voice resonant with authority. "We shall proceed one by one. Madame Duval, if you please." He gestured to a side table where a stenographer sat poised with pencil and pad. Elise rose with dignity, smoothing her black mourning dress. "Ask what you will, Inspector. My husband's death is a tragedy beyond words." Poirot interjected gently, his voice like silk over steel. "Madame, let us begin with the perfume." The dagger's hilt carried a scent. "Jasmine, non? It is the same as yours." Her eyes widened fractionally. "Yes, but I did not touch that dreadful thing. I lent my bottle to Miss Hargrove yesterday afternoon. She complained of a headache, much like my own." Lydia nodded vigorously from her seat. "It's true. I dabbed some on my wrists in the afternoon, but by evening I was in the library, absorbed in a book. I had no reason to go near the workshop." Weber leaned forward. "And this book, what was its title?" "A romance, The Shadow of the Past, by some English author. Irrelevant, surely." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Nothing is irrelevant, mademoiselle. Madame Laurent, you mentioned passing the library door. Describe what you saw." Sophie adjusted her spectacles, her voice steady but soft. "Just a silhouette, Lydia seated by the lamp, turning pages. I was on my way to the study for ink. My typewriter had run dry." The inspector made a note. "Your office adjoins the hall. Did you hear any unusual sounds from the staircase?" "Only the distant chime of clocks. I was typing letters, routine correspondence for Monsieur Duval's business." Victor halted his pacing, his face flushed. "This is absurd. Father was alone. Fritz guarded the stairs. How could anyone have reached him?" Weber turned to him. "Monsieur Victor, your walk by the lake. Can anyone corroborate it?" A fisherman from the village, summoned earlier by Weber's men, was brought in, a weathered man in oilskins, smelling of the lake. "Ja, I saw a gentleman like him, strolling the path around 11:30. He nodded as he passed, but didn't stop." 11:30, Poirot echoed. "Yet the death occurred nearer midnight. Time enough to return, perhaps?" Victor bristled. "I came back just before the scream, entering through the garden door. Ask the maid. She let me in." The maid, a plump girl with wide eyes, confirmed it nervously. "Yes, sir, around 11:50. He seemed agitated but said nothing." Dr. Becker extinguished his pipe with deliberate care. "My turn, I suppose. Duval and I parted on sour terms after our spat. He accused me of coveting his designs. Preposterous. I went to my room overlooking the tower. The curtains were drawn. I read until the commotion." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "What did you read, doctor?" "A treatise on escapements, dull but pertinent to my work." As the interrogations unfolded, Poirot wandered the room, pausing to examine the clocks. One, a grandfather model, had its weights slightly askew, as if recently disturbed. He filed it away in his mental catalogue. Whispers of deeper motives emerged. Duval's will, read briefly by the family lawyer that morning, indeed left the bulk to Victor, with provisions for Elise and a small bequest to Sophie for her loyalty. But rumors, elicited from the servants, spoke of debts, expansions to the workshop funded by loans, and Duval's recent irritability suggesting financial strain. Victor admitted, under pressure, to a recent quarrel. Father dismissed my ideas for improving the automaton. He said I lacked originality, but murder? I'd sooner destroy my own work. Lydia, when probed about her interest in the sapphires, confessed her family's gem trade background. My father owned mines in Ceylon. I know a fine stone when I see one, but I came here for Victor, not fortune. Sophie, more reticent, revealed she had overheard Becker and Duval's argument escalating to threats. Dr. Becker said, "You'll regret crossing me." But it was just words, professional jealousy. Becker laughed, a harsh bark. Jealousy? Duval poached my patents years ago in Geneva. I came to expose him, not kill him. Check my credentials. I'm ruined if his automaton succeeds, but alive he was my rival. Dead, he's a martyr. Poirot, listening intently, noticed a discrepancy. A torn scrap of paper in the drawing room's wastebasket, retrieved discreetly. It bore fragments of handwriting, Sophie's perhaps, hinting at a clandestine meeting. Midnight by the lake. Careful. He confronted her privately as the group broke for luncheon. Madame Laurent, this note, it suggests an assignation. With whom? She blushed deeply. It's personal, monsieur. Victor and I. We have grown close. Monsieur Duval discovered it yesterday. He was furious, threatening to dismiss me and alter the will. Ah, Poirot murmured. The affair of the heart. And did he act on this threat? I typed a draft of the new will that evening, excluding Victor in favor of charity, but he never signed it. Lydia, overhearing from the doorway, paled. Victor? With her? But we are engaged. Victor entered then, his expression stormy. Lydia, it's complicated. Father forbade it, but Sophie understands my work. The revelations hung in the air like the chime of a distant bell. Weber, compiling his notes, mused aloud. Motives abound. Inheritance, rivalry, betrayal, greed. But the locked door, that remains the enigma. Poirot smiled enigmatically. Enigmas are but illusions, Inspector. Observe the garden, a bench near the tower wall, and beneath it, this. He produced a small sapphire fragment, glinting in his palm. Not from the dagger, but perhaps from the clock face itself. Someone dislodged it. Climbing, maybe? The group stared, whispers rippling. Becker examined it. Impossible. The tower is sheer stone. Yet possibilities exist, Poirot countered. We must probe further. As the afternoon wore on, Weber dispatched men to verify alibis, the fisherman's timing, the maid's account, even Becker's reading material. Poirot retired to the salon, requesting Duval's ledgers from Sophie. Leafing through them, he noted irregularities, entries for sapphire acquisitions far below market value, sourced from shadowy dealers. Smuggling? He pondered aloud. Elise, passing by, overheard. Henri dabbled in such things to fund his dreams. He planned to cease, to confess all. It weighed on him. Who knew of this, madam? Only me, and perhaps Becker, from their shared past. The doctor's name surfaced again, a thread weaving through the tapestry. Yet Poirot's gray cells hummed with doubt. The perfume, the gear, the chime, all pieces of a greater mechanism. By evening, tension gripped the villa like a vice. Weber announced no arrests yet, but eyes watched each other warily over dinner. Poirot, savoring his tisane, observed the interplay. Stolen glances between Victor and Sophie, Lydia's forced smiles, Becker's smug detachment, Elise's quiet grief. In the quiet of his chamber later, Poirot arranged his thoughts like cards in a solitaire game. The alibis, They interlock, yet fracture under scrutiny. The truth hides in the shadows of what is unsaid. Outside, the lake lapped softly, and the Sapphire Clocktower stood silent, its secrets ticking onward into the night. Chapter 4. The Hidden Mechanism. The afternoon light slanted through the high windows of Henri Duval's private study, illuminating dust motes that danced like errant seconds in the still air. Hercule Poirot, having secured Inspector Weber's grudging permission, entered this sanctum of invention with the reverence of one stepping into a cathedral of intellect. The room, tucked away on the villa's upper floor, was a repository of genius. Walls lined with shelves, groaning under blueprints rolled into neat cylinders, prototypes of intricate mechanisms displayed under glass cases, and a massive oak desk strewn with sketches that depicted gears interlocking in hypnotic patterns. The faint tick of a solitary clock on the desk, Duval's personal timepiece, engraved with his initials, served as a poignant reminder of the man who had once commanded this space. Poirot settled into the leather armchair, his small frame enveloped by its grandeur, and began his methodical examination. Weber had assigned a constable to observe, but the young man stood awkwardly by the door, more intimidated by the detective's reputation than by any potential mischief. "Proceed, Monsieur Poirot," Weber had said earlier, his tone laced with skepticism. "But tamper with nothing. These are evidence now." With delicate fingers, Poirot unrolled the blueprints, his green eyes scanning the precise lines and annotations. Designs for the automaton dominated, diagrams showing its internal springs, the celestial calculator that predicted eclipses, and annotations in Duval's spidery hand noting improvements. Yet, amid the technical marvels, a slim ledger caught Poirot's attention, bound in worn leather, its pages filled with columns of figures that, at first glance, appeared mundane. But closer inspection revealed a code, abbreviations for gem shipments, prices absurdly low, and sources listed as anonymous suppliers from distant ports. "Smuggling," Poirot murmured, his mustache quivering with the thrill of discovery. The sapphires of the clock tower, they were not acquired through honest means. Duval funded his obsessions with black market dealings. He cross-referenced dates, purchases coinciding with workshop expansions, debts masked as investments. A motive emerged. Exposure would ruin reputations, dissolve partnerships. Rising, Poirot pocketed a few telling pages for Weber's review and descended to confront Elise Duval. He found her in the conservatory, tending to exotic orchids with mechanical precision, her black attire a stark contrast to the vibrant blooms. "Madame," he began without preamble, "your husband was no saint. These ledgers, they speak of illicit gems, sapphires smuggled to adorn his creations and settle his accounts." Elise's shears paused mid-snip, a petal fluttering to the floor. She set them down with deliberate calm. "Henri was a visionary, Monsieur Poirot. Visions require resources. He bought those stones cheaply from unconventional sources. But he had regrets. He planned to confess to the authorities, to make amends. It tormented him in his final days." Poirot leaned on his silver-headed cane, his gaze piercing. "And who shared this secret, madame? Who might fear the confession's fallout?" She hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the garden. "Myself, of course, and perhaps Dr. Becker. They collaborated once on a venture in Berlin before rivalries soured it. Henri hinted at dissolving old ties." "A Berlin betrayer," Poirot echoed softly, filing the phrase away. He thanked her and withdrew, his mind abuzz. The automaton beckoned next, a puzzle within the puzzle. Returning to the sealed workshop with Weber's key, Poirot approached the brass figure under the constable's watchful eye. The machine stood inert, its astronomer's garb dusty now, the bloodstain a grim memento on its chest. Poirot circled it, probing for anomalies. His fingers traced the seams, discovering a concealed panel at the base. With a click, it opened to reveal a switch, cunningly disguised as a decorative rivet. Activating it, the automaton sprang to life with a whir of gears. Its arms extended in a graceful arc, mimicking the orbit of planets, then pointed insistently toward the tower wall behind it. A hidden compartment? Poirot pressed the indicated stone, and a section of paneling swung open, revealing a narrow recess. Inside lay a folded note in Duval's handwriting. "Beware the Berlin betrayer. Secrets unwind at midnight." "Mon Dieu!" Poirot exclaimed, handing the note to the constable. Duval anticipated danger. This betrayer. It points to Becker, the Berliner. Word spread swiftly through the villa. Becker, summoned to the drawing room, faced Poirot and Weber with indignation etched on his features. "This is slander. That note, it's from an old feud, a patent dispute in 15. Duval labeled many betrayers in his paranoia. My Berlin roots are coincidence. I left there decades ago." Weber scrutinized him. "Yet you argued fiercely the night of the murder, and these smuggling ledgers mention a KB as a partner in early deals." Becker's beard twitched. "Ancient history. We parted ways when Duval grew greedy. But murder? I'd expose him publicly, not stab him in secret." As Becker stormed out, Victor Duval entered, his face pale. He had overheard the exchange from the hall. "Father's note? Does it implicate me?" "No, but there's something I must confess." He glanced around, ensuring privacy. "My affair with Sophie. Father discovered it that afternoon. He raged, threatened to disinherit me entirely, said I'd shamed the family name." Poirot nodded sagely. "And Madame Laurent? She knows of this?" Victor sank into a chair. "She typed the draft will, excluding me. Father dictated it in anger, but I begged him to reconsider. He locked himself in the workshop to think." Sophie, called in next, confirmed it with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, I prepared the document in my office. Monsieur Duval was distraught. The affair, the smuggling burdens. He said he'd sign it at midnight after the unveiling. But now, it's unsigned, worthless." Lydia Hargrove, lingering in the doorway, overheard the revelation. Her composure cracked, her hands clenching at her sides. "Victor, with her, all this time?" She turned to Poirot, her voice sharp. "And my debts, you've heard the whispers. Yes, I've gambled unwisely, pawned a Hargrove heirloom to cover losses. But kill for sapphires? Absurd. I planned to elope with Victor if his father cut him off. We'd start anew in England, where my family's estates include gem mines. I know cutting and valuation from childhood lessons, but that proves nothing." Poirot observed her closely, noting the defensive spark in her eyes. "Mademoiselle, knowledge of gems could aid in prying one loose, perhaps to fund an escape. The chip I found in the garden suggests tampering." She laughed bitterly. "Tampering? I'd sooner sell my soul. Ask Victor. I was with him in spirit, if not body." As shadows lengthened across the lake, the villa's atmosphere grew oppressive. Poirot requested tea in the salon, using the respite to assemble his thoughts. The hidden mechanism of the crime mirrored Duval's inventions. Layers of deception, springs of motive coiled tight. The smuggling tied Becker and Elise, the affair entangled Victor and Sophie, Lydia's debts added desperation, yet the locked room persisted. An illusion, surely. Evening brought fresh turmoil. A piercing scream echoed from the evidence room, where Weber had stored the dagger under lock and key. The group converged to find the maid, hysterical, pointing to an empty case. "It's gone. I came to dust and the door was ajar. The dagger vanished." Weber thundered orders, searching rooms and persons. Panic rippled, the killer active still, perhaps seeking to destroy evidence or strike again. Fritz the servant reported a shadowy figure in the garden earlier. The constable admitted dozing briefly. Poirot, amid the chaos, examined the evidence room's lock, picked cleanly, no force. "The hand that wields the dagger knows subtlety," he remarked to Weber. "This theft, it confirms the murderer fears discovery." Dinner was a somber affair, eyes darting suspiciously over crystal and silver. Becker nursed a brandy, muttering about false accusations. Victor and Sophie avoided glances, Lydia's poise brittle. Elise retired early, pleading exhaustion. In his chamber later, Poirot paced, the moonlit lake a silver mirror below. The note's warning, the automaton's dance, the missing weapon, all threads in a web. The Berlin betrayer, he pondered. Not Becker alone, perhaps? Berlin? A code? Or a misdirection? Sleep eluded him as the clock tower chimed the hours, its sapphires unseen but ever present. The mechanism of murder ticked on, but Poirot's gray cells whirred faster, closing in on the hidden spring that would release the truth. Chapter 5. Shadows on the Lake. The veil of twilight descended over Lake Zurich, transforming its placid waters into a mirror of indigo and silver, where the distant lights of the city flickered like hesitant stars. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the gathering chill, had decreed a reconstruction of the fatal evening, a theatrical reenactment designed to illuminate the shadows cast by alibis and deceptions. Inspector Weber, though skeptical of such methods, had acquiesced, recognizing in Poirot's insistence the mark of a mind attuned to the subtleties of human behavior. "Very well, monsieur," he had said, his voice gruff. "But if this yields nothing, we proceed with arrests based on evidence, not dramatics." The household assembled at the base of the Sapphire Clocktower as the first stars pricked the sky, their faces etched with varying degrees of reluctance and apprehension. Elise Duval, swathed in a dark shawl, stood with composed dignity, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Victor shifted restlessly, his hands thrust deep into his pockets. Lydia Hargrove clutched her fiancé's arm, her pallor accentuated by the moonlight. Dr. Becker, pipe in hand, exhaled clouds of smoke that mingled with the evening mist rising from the lake. Sophie Laurent lingered at the periphery, her notebook absent for once, as if the weight of revelations had rendered documentation futile. Fritz the servant and the maid hovered nearby, under Weber's watchful gaze, while constables positioned lanterns to mimic the illumination of that fateful night. Poirot, resplendent in his overcoat and Homburg hat, addressed them with the authority of a stage director. "Mes amis, we recreate the hours before midnight, each to your claimed position, s'il vous plaît. Act as you did, walk, read, rest, and we shall see what the night reveals. The clock tower will chime as before. Listen well." He dispatched Victor first, directing him to retrace his lakeside stroll. The young man set off along the gravel path that skirted the water's edge, his footsteps crunching faintly. Poirot followed at a discreet distance, noting the fog that rolled in from the lake, much as it had on the night of the murder. A thick, swirling veil that obscured the villa's outline after mere yards. Visibility is poor, Poirot observed to Weber, who accompanied him. Victor's route curves away. One could slip back unseen. They paused where the fisherman had reported his sighting. Weber consulted his notes. 11:30, he said, but the path loops, time enough to return by 11:45, commit the deed, and re-emerge for the maid to see at 11:50. Victor, returning breathless, protested. The fog disorients, yes, but I wandered aimlessly. No detours to the tower. Next, Lydia was positioned in the library, a cozy room lined with leather-bound volumes and lit by a single lamp as on the evening in question. Poirot entered quietly, observing her seated with the novel open before her, but his keen eyes alighted on the page. Not a romance, as she had claimed, but a treatise on toxicology, illustrations depicting vials and their deadly contents. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "this book, The Shadow of the Past? No, it is Poisons and Their Antidotes. A curious choice for light reading." Lydia started, closing the volume hastily. "A mistake. I must have picked the wrong one in haste, or perhaps it was substituted. Coincidence, nothing more." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Coincidences, they are the lazy man's explanation. And the dagger bore no poison, yet knowledge of such arts suggests versatility in methods." Sophie's office adjoined a hall, her typewriter stationed on a modest desk. Poirot requested she demonstrate her typing. The keys clacked rhythmically as she reproduced a sample letter. But examining the ribbon afterward, he noted the impressions faded after an entry timed at 11 o'clock. "Madame, no further keystrokes. You claim to have worked until the scream, yet the machine tells otherwise." She flushed, her fingers interlacing nervously. I paused to think, to compose my thoughts. The affair with Victor, it distracted me. I stared out the window, lost in worry. "The window overlooks the garden path to the tower," Poirot noted. "A vantage for observation, or intervention." Dr. Becker's guest room commanded a view of the clock tower's silhouette against the lake. He drew the curtains as he claimed, retiring to his armchair with a book. Poirot, entering with permission, scanned the space. A telescope mounted on a tripod by the sill, its lens polished and aligned toward the workshop. "Doctor, this instrument, not for stargazing, I think. The automaton's unveiling was visible from here, non? Or perhaps more, spying on Duval's secrets." Becker adjusted his spectacles, unperturbed. "A hobbyist's tool. I observed the lake birds by day. At night, the curtains were closed. I saw nothing untoward." Elise remained in her bedroom, reclining on the chaise with a compress to her forehead, enacting her headache. Poirot inspected her vanity. Powders, creams, and a missing vial, labeled as a sedative, its absence noted in the inventory. "Madame, this potion, to ease your pain, or perhaps to drug another. Fritz the servant mentioned drowsiness that night. He guarded the stairs but admits to nodding off briefly." Elise sat up, her expression indignant. "I took a dose myself. If it's missing, perhaps the maid misplaced it. Accuse me if you must, but I stirred not from this room." The group reconvened at the tower base as the clock chimed 11, its melody eerie in the fog-shrouded night. Poirot directed attention to the automaton, now under guard. Producing the misplaced gear from his pocket, evidence preserved, he fitted it into the machine's casing. It slotted perfectly, but a fresh scratch marred its edge, as if forced hastily. "Behold," he declared, activating the device. It whirred, then stuttered, its arms jerking out of sequence. Tampered with. Someone altered it to trigger the midnight chime falsely, staging the time of death. Duval died at 11:45, as the internal hands show, but the audible signal deceived us. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Weber, impressed despite himself, turned to Becker. "You, doctor, with your horological expertise, could manipulate such a mechanism. The smuggling ties, the note's warning, circumstantial but damning." Becker protested vehemently. "Preposterous. I'd not stoop to sabotage my rival's toy." The inspector, unmoved, signaled his men. "Dr. Carl Becker, you are under arrest for the murder of Henri Duval." Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the tension. "Non, Inspector. Hold. The gray cells, they whisper otherwise. Arrest if you must, but the true culprit smiles in the shadows. We must await the eclipse. Duval's automaton predicts it tomorrow night. Its dance may reveal more." As Becker was led away in handcuffs, grumbling about injustices, the group dispersed uneasily. Poirot lingered by the lake, the fog enveloping him like a cloak. Under the partial moon's shadow, a precursor to the full eclipse, he contemplated the sapphire chip from the garden. Examining it anew under a lantern, he confirmed. Its cut matched not the dagger's stones, but the clock face's intricate inlay. Dislodged from above, he mused. A climber, agile and daring, scaling the exterior wall to enter unseen. The locked door, a ruse. The night deepened, waves lapping at the shore like whispered secrets. In the villa, lights winked out one by one, but suspicions burned bright. Poirot retired to his chamber, arranging clues in his mind like pieces on a chessboard. The reconstruction had cracked alibis, exposed lies, but the killer's identity hovered just beyond reach. "Patience," he told himself, gazing at the starlit sky. "The eclipse will cast light on the darkness." Yet, as the clock tower struck midnight, truly this time, a distant splash echoed from the lake, faint but unmistakable. A coincidence, or another thread unraveling in the intricate web of deceit. Chapter 6. The Revelation. The eclipse hung over Zurich like a celestial omen, the moon's shadow nibbling at the sun's edge and casting an unearthly pallor over the lake's rippling surface. 2 days had passed since Becker's arrest, a period of uneasy limbo during which Inspector Weber's men combed the villa for further evidence, and the household moved like ghosts through its halls. Hercule Poirot, ever the maestro of deduction, had spent the interim in quiet contemplation, his little gray cells weaving the disparate threads into a tapestry of truth. Now, as the partial darkness deepened, he summoned the suspects to the drawing-room once more, the stage set for the grand unveiling. The room, with its array of clocks now ticking in a discordant chorus, as if protesting the disruption of their orderly world, felt smaller, more oppressive under the dimmed light filtering through the heavy drapes. Elise Duval occupied the settee, her mourning weeds absorbing the shadows, her face a mask of fragile poise. Victor stood by the fireplace, leaning on the mantel as if for support, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Lydia Hargrove sat rigidly beside him, her hands folded in her lap, though a faint tremor betrayed her composure. Sophie Laurent perched on a straight-backed chair, her fingers absently smoothing the fabric of her skirt. Dr. Becker, released on Poirot's insistence but under guard, paced the room's perimeter, his beard bristling with indignation. Weber and his constables flanked the doors, ready to act. Poirot entered with measured steps, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his mustache impeccably curled. He positioned himself at the room's center, commanding attention like a conductor before an orchestra. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice resonant yet calm. "We gather under the shadow of the eclipse, as predicted by Monsieur Duval's automaton, a fitting backdrop for revelations that eclipse deception with truth. This murder, it is a masterpiece of misdirection, akin to the intricate mechanisms your host so cherished. But Hercule Poirot sees through the gears of illusion." He paused, allowing the clocks ticking to underscore his words. "First, the time of death. Not midnight as the chime suggested, but 11:45, frozen on the tower's internal dial. The midnight toll? A clever artifice. The automaton reprogrammed to emit a recorded peal, delaying discovery and forging an alibi for the killer. Who possessed the skill? Several among you, trained in horology's arts." Turning to Victor, Poirot's gaze softened momentarily. "You, mon jeune ami, bore the weight of paternal disapproval. Your ideas dismissed, your affair with Madame Laurent exposed. Motives for rage. You wandered the lake path, your return timed conveniently after the supposed hour. Yet the fog obscured much, and your hands, they are inventor's hands, capable of tampering. But none, you did not kill your father. Your love for Sophie, it bound you to hope, not destruction." Victor exhaled sharply, relief mingling with surprise. Lydia squeezed his hand, though her eyes darted to Sophie with lingering resentment. Poirot pivoted to Lydia. "Mademoiselle Hargrove, your debts, they gnaw like a faulty spring. The sapphires called to you, their value a salve for your losses. Your knowledge of gems, honed in English mines, equipped you to assess and perhaps extract them. The chip in the garden, dislodged from the clock face. Your book on poisons, a hint of darker inclinations. You read not romance, but recipes for death, though the dagger bore no toxin. Yet your motive was escape with Victor, not murder. You pried no stone for gain. Your heart, it sought alliance, not blood." Lydia's shoulders sagged, a tear tracing her cheek. "Thank God," she whispered. Sophie met Poirot's eyes steadily as he addressed her. "Madame Laurent, the faithful secretary, yet entangled in passion's web. You typed the damning will, excluding Victor at Duval's dictate. Your pause in work, staring from the window, opportunity to slip away. Loyalty to your employer warred with love. The torn note hinted at midnight meetings. But your hand stayed. You falsified nothing beyond the draft. Devotion, not deceit, guided you." Sophie's nod was slight, her relief palpable as she glanced at Victor. Now, Poirot faced Becker, who halted his pacing, arms crossed defiantly. "Doctor, your rivalry burned like overheated metal. Duval's automaton threatened your Berlin legacy. Old patents stolen, you claimed. The note warned of a Berlin betrayer. You, with your origins and shared smuggling past. Your telescope spied on the tower. Your expertise could reset the machine. The argument escalated to threats. Circumstantial chains bound you. Yet you are not the murderer. Vengeance would be public, exposing Duval's flaws, not this intimate strike." Becker's tension eased, though suspicion lingered in his glare. "Then who, Poirot? This charade ends now." The room fell silent, the eclipse reaching its peak, plunging the space into deeper gloom. Poirot turned slowly to Elise, who stiffened, her handkerchief pressed to her lips. Madame Duval, the grieving widow, elegant, devoted, You alone wore the jasmine perfume scenting the dagger. Your headache sequestered you. The missing sedative vial, used to drug Fritz, the stair guard, inducing his doze. Agile from your alpine youth, you scaled the tower's exterior wall, a feat concealed by fog and shadow. Entering through a hidden panel, known only to you, confided by Henri in marital trust, you confronted him. His plan to confess the smuggling? It would shatter your social world, expose scandals, ruin reputations built on illusions of respectability. Elise's composure cracked, her voice a whisper. Lies, all lies. Non, madame. The sapphire chip fell during your descent, glinting in the garden as evidence. You stabbed in fury, then reset the automaton to chime falsely, creating the locked room enigma. The blood on its chest? Your touch, staging accusation. The stolen dagger from evidence. Your desperate bid to erase traces, but too late. She rose unsteadily, her eyes blazing. He would have destroyed us. Confessions to authorities, poverty, disgrace. For what? His precious conscience? I begged him to stop, but he insisted. In that moment, the dagger. It was there, and rage took me. The confession hung in the air, raw and irrevocable. Weber stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Madame Elise Duval, you are under arrest. Poirot nodded solemnly. The little gray cells, they never fail. Human passions, love, greed, fear, they wind the springs of crime, but truth unwinds them. As Elise was led away, sobs echoing, the eclipse began to wane, sunlight piercing the clouds like justice's dawn. The group dispersed in stunned silence, Victor embracing Sophie, Lydia clinging to him, Becker departing with a curt nod. Weber clapped Poirot on the shoulder. Remarkable, monsieur. Zurich owes you a debt. Poirot inclined his head modestly. Merely order restored, Inspector. Chaos offends the symmetry of the mind. Chapter 7. The Ticking Resolution. The sun rose over Lake Zurich the morning after the revelation, bathing the villa in a golden light that seemed to wash away the shadows of deceit and sorrow. Hercule Poirot, having savored a leisurely breakfast of croissants and café au lait in the sunlit conservatory, prepared for his departure. The air carried the fresh scent of dew-kissed gardens, and the distant chime of the Sapphire Clocktower, now restored to its precise rhythm, marked the hours with reassuring regularity. Inspector Weber had departed earlier, escorting Elise Duval to the authorities, her confession secured, and the case closed with Swiss efficiency. Poirot found Victor Duval in the workshop, meticulously adjusting the automaton under the tower's mechanism. The young man's face, though marked by grief, held a spark of determination. Monsieur Poirot, he said, setting down his tools, words fail to express our gratitude. Father's legacy, it survives because of you. Poirot inclined his head modestly. It is the order of things, mon cher. Chaos must yield to method. You inherit not just the villa and workshop, but the responsibility to honor Duval's genius ethically. No more smuggling shadows. Let the sapphires shine honestly. Victor nodded solemnly. I've destroyed the illicit ledgers. The automaton will be unveiled publicly next week, as a tribute, not a secret. And Sophie, she stays on, as partner in more than business. A faint smile crossed his lips, hinting at futures mended. Lydia Hargrove approached from the hall, her auburn hair catching the light, a suitcase in hand. We're to wed quietly in Geneva, she confided, linking arms with Victor. No grand affairs, just us, away from scandals. My debts? Settled with a family loan. No need for desperate measures now. Poirot approved with a twinkle in his eye. "Love, it triumphs over folly. But remember, mademoiselle, gems are fleeting. Trust endures." Dr. Becker, packing in the salon, offered a gruff handshake. "Poirot, you cleared my name, though I half expected the noose. Duval and I, rivals to the end, but his work, it inspires even me. I'll return to Berlin, perhaps collaborate on ethical designs." "Progress from enmity," Poirot replied. "The gray cells applaud such resolutions." Sophie Laurent, overseeing the household's return to normalcy, presented Poirot with a small gift, a pocket watch engraved with his initials, its face inlaid with a single sapphire. "From all of us, monsieur, a token of time well spent." He accepted it gracefully. "Madame, your discretion and heart, they were the true mechanisms at work here. May your days tick smoothly." As the carriage arrived to convey him to the Hauptbahnhof, Poirot paused on the villa's threshold, surveying the scene. The lake's serene expanse, the clock tower standing sentinel, its sapphires winking in the sunlight like absolved sins. The maid and Fritz waved from the garden, their duties resuming without the pall of suspicion. On the train, Poirot settled into his compartment, the watch in his palm a comforting weight. The alpine scenery unfolded beyond the window, peaks piercing the sky, valleys lush and verdant, a panorama of nature's impeccable design. Yet his thoughts lingered on human intricacies, the passions that wound springs of violence, the deceptions that jammed gears of trust. "Human folly," he mused aloud to the empty air. "It repeats like a faulty chime. Greed, betrayal, fear, they drive the hands of crime. But justice, it resets the balance." He twirled his mustache, reflecting on Elise's downfall. A woman of elegance, undone by pride, her climb up the tower a metaphor for ambition's perilous heights. The conductor announced the border crossing, and Zurich faded into memory. Poirot opened his notebook, jotting notes for a future memoir, perhaps the mystery of the Sapphire Clocktower. But for now, contentment sufficed. The train's rhythm lulled him, and as the watch chimed softly in his pocket, he smiled. Time healed wounds, but truth endured, ticking eternally in the chambers of the mind.